biggest of the 4 countries in the United Kingdom. England is home of over 50 million people, where almost 18% of that lives in its capital, London. As one of the oldest nations in the world, it has had a huge global impact. Parliamentary democracy, the English language, and the Christian religion can be cited as examples. A place known for its beautiful cathedrals and churches, castles and places, its world heritage, and, of course, the home of the royal family. The light bulb, the World Wide Web, and even your vacuum cleaner, all English inventions. Oh, and by the way, the fire extinguisher, let's not forget that. The British are crazy about fire safety. The birthplace of figures such as Sir Isaac Newton, Charles Darwin, Stephen Hawking, Shakespeare, Jane Austen, and of course, the Beatles.
Help! I need somebody help!
The UK has been described as a cultural superpower, and it has been ranked the 3rd most positively viewed nation in the world, behind, guess what, Germany and Canada. But how are British people? If you believe stereotypes, then you might think the British are super polite, crazy tea drinkers who don't like talking to each other, if not to complain about the weather and enjoy one beer too many after work. Even though the Brits do drink more tea than anybody else in the world, British culture is not that black and white, and to talk about all the aspects of it, one would need a much longer video than this one. That is why, today, we will look only into one thing: British politeness. Sorry can mean a genuine apology or be a passive-aggressive warning for you to get out of the way. There is always room for a please. And do not forget to say thank you at least 3 times on your way out. The level of politeness among British people may surprise some at first, and it has also raised some questions, if not suspicions, among researchers, academics, and the interested public in general. Are the British truly polite, or what do they mean when they are being polite? Famous dictionaries explaining what the British say and what they mean fill the headlines of online articles. Let's run through some examples. Let's imagine they tell you you should come to dinner sometime, and you happily make plans of when that should fit your schedule, only to find out that they do not really want you to come to dinner. Whereas this might not be the general case in all occasions, understanding the usage of understatement to grasp what lies behind British politeness is key to understanding the English behavior as a whole. As a famous quote reads, "The English have no soul, they have the understatement instead." But how polite are the Brits? We decided to get an insider's view. Let's hear what she thinks.
Politeness is a really complicated term because what I consider to be polite might be very different from what another area of our country considers to be polite. If you travel around the UK, you'll find that in London people are a lot more reserved than maybe in the southwest where we are. We're a lot chattier. Or in the north where people are incredibly friendly to one another. So concepts of politeness within the UK are very, very different themselves. British politeness, when you're thinking about specific examples of British politeness, we do say please, sorry and thank you an awful lot. We do talk about the weather an enormous amount, and often that is because we're slightly embarrassed about what to say next. So it's an excellent way of filling in gaps in conversation to talk about the weather, and we can talk about it an awful lot.
I think we Brits feel that, if you can say please, you can say thank you, you absolutely should. You should never not say it deliberately. So using that example, say if I walked through a door and didn't say thank you, the other person would be a bit angry, or annoyed. But stereotypically, also being British, we don't like telling people about it. We just sort of sit there in silence, like.
When I first moved to Exeter, and I lived in a small town just outside Exeter, went to their big supermarket and I bought a pineapple, and oh my goodness, I've never heard such consternation. They practically had a whole conversation over the tannoy about the fact that I'd bought a pineapple, and I was like, I've moved to an alien place. I don't really understand. I love it now. I've been here for nearly 20 years. And I am that person now who has a conversation with you in the supermarket if you've bought a pineapple. So it's amazing how kind of culturally flexible you need to be even within this tiny island.
I think typically it wasn't even that people were being rude. It was more they weren't saying please because you don't say please in that sentence structure, or bitter or whatever, or danke. So, there'd be times where almost jokingly they'd, German friends in particular, speaking in English would be quite almost like sending commands rather than like asking questions. It'd be like pass the pencil, or like, pass the pen. Like, please, would be nice there.
So my top tips for being interculturally sensitive when you move to the UK. Number one, really listen to what everybody's saying. When you first come here, listen to the amount of please and thank yous and the sorries and where they come. The quicker you can pick those up, the better off you'll be. Number two, don't really pay attention to what people are saying, because we often say the complete opposite of what we mean. Try and listen to what is the fluff and the padding in a sentence to what we're actually trying to get to. So we will have an intention in a sentence that we might add a lot of extra words to because we want to appear polite in our own country. So listen to what people are saying and try and strip away the padding as to what will actually be polite and direct. Number three, queue. Queue for everything. Queue for the bus, queue in the shop, queue in the pub, queue everywhere. If you're concerned about which end of the queue is where you should stand, ask somebody. They will love you. Don't be offended if somebody says, let's meet up for coffee, or we should really go out for a meal, and then you don't have an invitation straight away. Probably take us about 5 or 6 times of meeting you just casually before we then take it to the next level and go for a coffee. It's not that we're being rude, it's not that we don't like you. It's not you, it's us. We're generally embarrassed about absolutely everything, and we want to make sure you definitely like us before we ask you out for a coffee, even if it's just a casual thing. I hope that's helpful.
As we see, there's a lot more to British culture than simply politeness. There are multifarious differences in character between all the English people, and as with any other culture in the world, there is no way to generalize it all. Yet, understanding the broad picture of general behavior, communication, social norms, politeness, and everyday interactions is of key relevance for exchange students, such as ourselves, or anyone who ever wishes to visit the land of the Queen. Getting used to quirks of a new culture can be quite daunting and frustrating. Some things might seem alien at first, but with time one gets used to them. It is also important to realize that many of the stereotypes are just not true. The best way is to go out and experience it yourself.